All right, Chris, if you had one wish for the open source community, what would it be?
The currency of open source is contribution, and I think not enough organizations, contribute out there. They simply use. So my wish is for folks to join and support open source foundations and employ open source maintainers, so we ensure open source is sustainable for everyone.
Sounds amazing. All that and more on this episode of Transformers. What does transformation mean? And what can we learn from the leaders leading the way? Join me as I talk to technologists about business, transformation, technology, and just being human too. My name is Anne Fanai. I'm CIO and Vice President of Business Platform Transformation at IBM, and this is Transformers, a Think podcast. All right, Chris, I am going to dive in. We have known each other a really, really, really long time from when we were just babies starting our career.
Mm-hmm.
And you are now have a fancy title like I do, CTO at the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. So what does that actually mean?
Yeah, no, we've definitely known each other way too long from when I was basically a Linux open source nerd to
yes
to now. So these days I'm CTO of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, or known as CNCF in the industry, and it's literally the open source home for modern infrastructure. And kind of what I mean here, like cloud native basically refers to technology that enables you to scale your business to meet the demands of your platform application. And really the genesis of it came from kind of the internet scale Bay Area companies, or Google's, Facebook's, Netflix's of the world, of kind of the technology they use to scale to support their millions upon maybe billions of users, and to democratize that technology and open source it in a way to make it available so everyone could, benefit from it, not just a small subset of companies. And so CNCF has now grown, and we're about to celebrate our 10th year anniversary, next year. And, we are probably the largest open source, foundation outside of Linux Foundation itself. We host over 200 projects such as Kubernetes, Prometheus, Envoy, Istio, all these kind of big, large-scale projects that power basically the world. It's all most modern infrastructure these days is using some piece of CNCF open source technology, which is extremely wild in my opinion. It's completely been a fun almost decade journey inside of CNCF.
One thing I'd be curious, you've lived in this world, as you said, for so long. Are there myths that persist in the open source world? I feel like, it's always been almost like a religious war, kind of, are you open source or proprietary? Are there myths that you find you're still trying to debunk?
Oh, every day. Like sometimes there's the old, hey, open source software, is written by people that live in their, parents', basement, hacking away, working on things, which, to be honest, 25 years ago, that was true. That was me. Basically still just before I got really employed and a job, but now it's completely not true at all. Like things like Linux, Kubernetes, PyTorch, which powers, basically the AI revolution. These are all written by people with real jobs employed by, multi-billion dollar, companies. So, the majority of, let's call it, highly used critical open source software is full-time, employment, Red Hat, was famous for employing a lot of these, folks. There's GitLab, Google employs a ton of maintainers. I think Facebook is one of the largest companies or largest employers of Linux kernel maintainers. So I think that it's changed where, it's no longer kind of hobbyists, novices, hacking away, in a basement, somewhere, to actually it's the fabric of corporate and product development. These days, almost something like 90% of modern products are taking advantage of open source software in some way, depending how you kind of slice and dice it.
No, and I'm curious, not just in your seat, but with all the other foundations you're working with. I feel like AI, the way I'm thinking about it is everyone was a tech company, everyone was an e-commerce company, now everyone's an AI company, right? How Is that putting an impact in unexpected ways in open source AI?
In our world, like with open source, like, I mostly interact with developers, and, developers I find are, I don't say inherently lazy, but, they tend to be, they're very efficient. Maybe the better word is
I think
efficient.
efficient's a
Where
really good word for it. It's like, how
efficient's
can I,
word,
yeah,
not lazy,
yeah.
not lazy. So
Well, but
like
sometimes
things.
laziness drives efficiency. Let's be
Ex-
honest.
exactly. Like if I could go use a tool, or like all these like coding assistant tools out there, and I could actually make it improve my, workflow, or I could get stuff done faster. I could, or hey, everyone's rewriting stuff in like Rustlang now. Like I need to go like learn Rust potentially. Can this help me, like learn Rust faster? So we're actually seeing a lot of, AI used in terms of people like learning new languages, or, doing, essentially like automating their pull request queue management. So basically, hey, can I have, tools and bots that kind of assist me to like prune down my queue, or try to automatically, fix issues, right? So it's kind of I think developers are almost always at the like leading front of picking on like trends and tools. And, even though AI is still, on its kind of hype cycle march, developers were one of the first early adopters of AI before, students and kids figured out you could use like ChatGPT to cheat on your homework. Like developers almost always at like the leading front of doing this. And so, yeah, we're seeing it all over, open source land. I mean, some of the funny challenges, there's still kind of a lot of interesting like legal questions of like, yay, like did a robot write, like the robot wrote this, but where did the robot get inspired on to do this? So there's kind of a lot of interesting, fun, like legal debates going on out there that we're, wrestling with inside the CNCF and the Linux Foundation.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the next few years evolve with this, both like with the open source, with the proprietary. It's like, I agree, the hype cycle thing is real. It is so real. I feel like we're on the edge of like, it's not just a trough of disillusionment, it's like a
Mm-hmm.
cliff of disillusionment. Like I feel like we're teetering on the
Oh,
edge of sometimes.
the amount of consolidation that's going to happen with like there's just the crazy amount of funding and AI related startups. Like there's just no way it's going to sustain. Like you have this natural collapse that kind of happens. Generally there'll be maybe two or three, winners in the market. All the other folks kind of get collapsed in the larger companies, and we've seen this cycle happen so many times. It's fun. It's fun to watch. It's like it's when you expect it, it's easier to like not be surprised when it happens. And I think one of your roles as a leader is like kind of trying to understand and coach like your teams through like, hey, things are booming now, but let me tell you, things are eventually going to, collapse, and we got to prepare for that. We got to budget, we got to plan for that. So it's kind of a fun job that I kind of face these days.
All right, Chris, we're talking about AI open source. I think one of the natural topics that comes up from this oftentimes is data and security. Really, like, do you know where your data came from, and is it a secure system? Like, where does your head go when I bring up that topic?
Yeah, like AI is definitely kind of going through this, let's call it open source, revolution. And the reason open source is so successful these days and everywhere is because you're able to use, study, modify, and share it. And through that process, you're able to like figure out, are there potentially security issues? Probably. So you go fix them really quickly. Is there potentially any sensitivities around maybe who has access to make changes in that code, which has a security impact. AI is a little bit unique and a little bit different than software where AI models are built. They're still software packages, but their input involves data from all different sources, and that data definitely could potentially have issues from potentially what license, PI information. There's a whole slew of things you have to be very careful with. And I think what you're kind of seeing currently in the AI, let's call it AI revolution, open source revolution, is people are starting to like document those sources, a lot better. Companies, or even some companies are even like, they know they know things are so shaky that they're even indemnifying users of their products from this issue as things
Oh
get
yeah. I feel like there's a whole
you
new section of contracts that is developing because of AI.
it's crazy, right? You see in the news, there's like, the New York Times is, suing, folks for, lifting, like it's a very, like, there's a lot of kind of litigation. So I think, just like, just like software, I think it's important to know, like, where did it come from? Who's building it? Can I potentially make changes? What are my rights? Right. And I think with AI models, the same thing is going to apply with an extra sensitivity around data, because data is governed a little bit differently than software, which is mostly copyright law. Data has a whole other set of rules around it. So yeah, it's to me it's a very exciting space, and like I'm always a strong believer that the more transparency you have around the software or the model, the better it is to kind of find any issues. Like Linus's old law of the more eyes out there on code, well the more basically the more eyes are out there, the more bugs will be shallow. So that's kind of the whole thing that I think will also apply to AI.
Well, okay, so let me go back to something you just said a moment ago. You talked about, we were talking about like the funding and the startups. I mean, you did
Yeah.
a stint, like full disclosure,
Yeah.
you spent a short time at IBM. You did a little bit,
Yes.
did a bit of
Yeah.
time. That's where we met,
Yeah.
and in my first time here around here as well. But you also were very entrepreneurial before you really got working for the Linux Foundation,
Yeah.
CNCF. Like, how did that, how did your open source passion really connect with your entrepreneurial side?
Yeah. So I mean, like, kudos to when I was at IBM, as part of a program that IBM helped sponsor, a business degree focused on kind of technology commercialization, kind of like an MBA type thing, and I learned a little bit about. Hey, here's how business works. Here's like entrepreneurship. I actually, helped try to put together a business plan to try to raise money as part of that program. And so through that, I kind of got the taste of what's possible. Here's how capitalism works. Here's how entrepreneurship works. And I finished that degree, which was a little bit painful because I did it while working full time, which I
We
was
did
trying to
the
recommend.
same.
Yeah.
We did the same degree a couple years apart. I think.
Do not recommend doing the full time thing and
Working
working
in
and
grad
studying.
school, working in grad school is very, very, very hard.
Yeah, my friends, and it's a very tough thing. You kind of have to make some choices, but I don't regret the experience, at all. So that whole I basically my role at IBM was working on a open source project at the time called Eclipse, and essentially. What we saw working in the open was there's a lot of people that kind of wanted to build products on it, help manage their development environments. And so I kind of got like the startup bug, with a couple other colleagues to go start a company around essentially what was known as it's kind of what's called Eclipse Source, but it's basically the way I can describe it is managing development environments and scale. So you can make sure that your engineers are geared to go from day one. You have consistent settings and so on. Basically, if you're familiar with like GitHub code spaces or Gitpod, it's kind of managing development at a large development scale. So we did that, and it was kind of a fun experience for a while. I do have some kind of funny stories of where I kind of had some coworkers criticize me when I left. Because the first few months, we kind of like didn't really have. We're trying to like figure out how to get business, and they're like, "So Chris, like you're doing the same thing that you kind of were doing at your day job at IBM, but you're actually not getting paid for it now." And I'm like, "Yeah." Kind of true, and we did the full bootstrapping route. We didn't, raise money, and we kind of built a little successful business, and ended up, selling that to kind of a smaller consulting company out there, and kind of went on and spent some time working at Red Hat and eventually Twitter, where I learned a lot about truly what was cloud native software at the time, what was not called cloud native, but truly how to build distributed systems at scale, which led me eventually to kind of joining and building out the Cloud Native Computing Foundation based on that experience.
Yeah, it's like you needed the actual practical pragmatic along with the
Yeah,
bringing the pragmatic
yeah.
philosophical business, all the angles together.
No, totally. And I like until you run and build distributed systems at scale, like across either multiple data centers or cloud, like you have to get your hands dirty to truly understand, the problem space. And I was just kind of lucky to be in the right place and right time for that. And Twitter allowed me to kind of share and democratize a lot of that knowledge, because historically that was locked away, not really talked about outside of research papers.
All right, so I'm going to loop back to one other thing because you've mentioned Red Hat twice now. So um, another guest on this podcast, Marco Bill Peter, in the I think one of the things as we develop this podcast is it is such a small world we live in, and Marco and I have been working together for about a year and a half now. Turns out you and Marco knew each other from way back in the day, not quite as long as you and I have known each other. And there's a future guest, Eric Wood, who is also like we all kind of grew up at IBM together and went our separate ways too. But I asked Marco a specific question, and I want to ask you the reverse of it. So, just for context, I asked Marco, working for Red Hat, what do you think about foundations, open source foundations? What do you, sitting in a foundation seat, even having worked at an open source company, how do you feel? What do you think about open source companies?
I think we need more open source companies out there. Like the simple, view is I think open source has this problem where we just have a lot of projects. There's a lot of different ways of potentially sustaining them, right? You could donate, you could join a foundation, you could hire a maintainer. I think entrepreneurship and having more open source companies out there that, both work together, compete, results in better software for end users and customers out there. So I think we should encourage more open source companies out there and kind of encourage folks that have a project. The amount of time I spent kind of like I do a lot of mentorship on the side since like I tried to build an open source company. I did build an open source company back in the early days, and it was a fun experience. Learned a lot. Had a lovely little exit, and it was a great path, and that work helped sustain the open source project that I was working on, Eclipse, at the time. If we could do more of that and encourage it, uh, I think the better that open source will be more sustainable. Like I'm just a pro of I want to see more open source companies out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's the more eyes, more hands. It just makes it makes everything a bit better. So
Yeah, and the competition too. I think like competition leads to like little innovation. I think it's just a good good dynamic, and improves the software too. Like there's the Linus, who's like the creator of Linux, has like this thing called Linus's law. The more eyes on a thing, like more eyes makes all bugs shallow is kind of a saying, and I think there's it's true, but it's also I think the corollary for that for me is the more eyes and folks that are kind of working open source software is not only the bugs that become easier to find and fix, you actually make it more sustainable by kind of allowing more participation, entrepreneurship.
yeah, and it's funny. I've always thought of open source as like the axiom of sunlight's the best disinfectant too,
Mhm,
right? It's
mhm.
there's nothing hidden, everything's out there. It's
Yeah,
it's beyond democratization as everyone can look. So it's not like it's not a hacker trying to find something. It's like, well, it's out there. More eyes are going to fix it. Things are going to make it better.
totally. We're kind of going through some of this same journey. Like I have a fun kind of I'm on the board of the Open Source Initiative, which recently helped define what open source AI is, and like AI is software, right? But there's a lot of time when you build models, they could be a little bit black boxy. So it's almost like going back to the days of proprietary software. It's like, how do I improve my AI model? How do I see that it's maybe not
Like,
biased or
what's
yeah,
in this
yeah,
model?
eh,
Like, I don't exactly know. It's like,
yeah.
yeah.
So AI is getting we're in the process of an open source revolution in the AI field right now, which is quite awesome to see.
No, yeah, I think super excited about that from my seat too. So, one of the things, one of the aspects we're trying to talk about in this podcast is the human element. And, you know, one of the things that you shared is I think we have a common thing. Our parents have no idea what we do for a living.
Mhm.
They love us. We say we know you're successful, but we have no idea what you guys do all day.
Yeah.
Um, but one thing I think from a human aspect, you shared a story about you know open source and your parents
Mhm.
and what it
Mhm.
actually means. And I think would you mind sharing that
Uh,
story?
yeah, so I'll preface this where I think my mom is still disappointed that I'm not like a doctor or lawyer at the end of the day because when I was growing up, I kind of was in the basement, working and hacking on Linux, trying to develop, get,
You were the guy in the
get,
basement. You already admitted
exactly.
that.
I was the open source nerd in the basement, just wanting to learn how to make, video games and like hack on Linux. But I learned a lot about how, operating system works, how things are built. Like it's truly it's kind of like for me, it was like growing up, I loved Legos and this was like digital Legos and it was like just awesome So, now, with kind of a little bit more success in, life, my mom has, stopped giving me such a hard time of not being a doctor or lawyer, but she still really doesn't understand, kind of the impact of the work. And I had a, discussion with her recently over Thanksgiving, and I was like, do you understand that, like, everything that like, hey, you just ordered some DoorDash, like, let me kind of walk you through that. Like, the app you use, like, is using open source software. It is back and it's hitting a Kubernetes cluster, which is in the foundation. It's hitting an Envoy, proxy, and I try to kind of just explain it to her, like, hey, you book tickets, and for everything, or you go to the Apple, .com, and everything is backed by open source software, and a lot of it is from the foundation that I help start and run. And then so she kind of like she kind of gets it, and she's a little bit proud, but like there, I think that's like there's this like Eastern European disappointment that I'm still not like a doctor or a lawyer, but she is proud of like the impact and kind of understand it. But it is hard to kind of explain, because it is, this stuff is truly invisible, and I think that's some of the successes. All the stuff that we've kind of helped develop is, Linux runs in 99% of computers out there. Kubernetes is in every major, cloud. PyTorch powers the AI revolution. All this stuff is very, very for kind of like hidden behind the scenes from like people that are actually normally using the software. It's kind of akin to like a car. It's like, you turn on the car, it works, but you don't understand all the underpinnings, like the engine and the software that really runs. And you shouldn't have to, but like, it's still nice to like, for your parents to acknowledge that, like, you had a part in building some of the engines and putting
Yeah,
things.
like, yeah, all this. And I mean, cars an interesting example because so many of the cars too are using open source based.
Totally. Yeah. Toyota is like running Linux. Like, it's absolutely crazy. There's stuff in Linux and in cars and satellites. Like, someone recently told me they put Kubernetes on a satellite. I was like, oh gosh, why? Like, but okay, cool,
I was
awesome.
going to say, I have so many questions. I have so many
It's like,
questions.
yeah, exactly.
Chris, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
Aside of our long friendship and grabbing those good whiskeys every once in a while, just thanks for taking time out of your day to join me on the podcast. And, and thanks for sharing some of your personal stories as well.
Yeah, awesome. Happy to do this anytime. It's great to kind of reconnect. I still have like very fond memories of my time at IBM, and that's nice to kind of see you back there.
We hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Transformers. And if you did, hope to see you back in a couple weeks. Thank you so much.